So, in this episode, I'm going to be talking about my very first business that I started, knowing absolutely nothing other than my passion for being creative. So, I tell you a little bit about my decision to go to the college I went to, and basically to my dad's slight disappointment to pursue an art career, which I don't know that he fully understood, but he definitely supported me because he knew I was really excited about it. And that whole process, it's definitely a mini memoir episode of my late high school, college, and that first job I had, and then the first business I started. And you'll get a kick out of it. So, anyway, I hope you enjoy it. And also, the prompt I'm going to leave you with is about taking a look at that entrepreneurial energy, mindset, desire that you have, or whether it was for the business you're running now, business you want to start, or maybe a side hustle or a project that you worked on. There's still entrepreneurial spirit that just drives that passion, that drives that desire to be out doing our thing and doing what we love to do. That's what the prompt is about in this one. I hope you enjoy another glimpse into Terry Pappy and my journey. Take care. Welcome to My Solopreneur Life. I'm Terry Pappy, your gracious host, and I am so glad you're here. I have a wonderful episode for you. Sit back, relax, and let's have some real talk about what it is to be a solopreneur. Well, hey there, and welcome to episode 2 of season 1 of the My Solopreneur Life show. I sound so official, don't I? Bear with me while I'm getting the hang of this. This is all still coming back from my first show I did a couple years ago. Plus it's video, so that's a whole different level of complexity here where I'm like, look at the camera, Terry, and make sure you remember what you're talking about. So in this episode, I want to talk about my very first business that I did after college. But before I get into that backstory, I'm going to give you a backstory to the backstory. I've been blessed with a lot of creative ability, naturally talented with drawing and coming up with stories and writing. And so I had those strengths coming up through grade school and high school and such. I won awards for my writing and for my design. And it's just been one of those things where I've just naturally been very, very talented in those areas. And I can thank God for those blessings because it really has helped me complement the other strengths that I've developed in my professional career. When I was, I guess, in 11th grade, although today's kids are pressured so much earlier to decide where they're going to go to college and what they're going to do for their career, it's so competitive. It wasn't like that when I went to school, but we still had to decide as kids in my family that where we wanted to go to school, what did we want to major in, focus in? What did we want to do for our vocation? Like we knew at that age, right? Anyway, my family was really traditional from the standpoint of the four-year school. That was my dad's biggest thing. He never went to college, and he was a high school grad and went into the Navy right after he was in high school. And that was it. He got out of the Navy, he started his business, and I talked a lot about that in the first episode. For him, one of his definitions of success was to build a business where he could support not only his family, but also put all four of us, through college, which he did, and then some. And I'm forever grateful for the lessons that I learned from my dad, as many of us can attribute many of the lessons that we had as young people from our parents and other family members and mentors who helped bring us up in the world. And my dad was, I think he was given that I was the youngest in the family, I think he was a little put back when I told him what I wanted to, when I wanted to go to art school for my college education. Between my 11th and 12th grade summer, I found out about the Art Institute of Pittsburgh. And at the time, it was just a 2-year school that offered an associate's degree in 4 different categories of commercial art. Art for business, basically. They had photography, they had interior design, they had fashion, and then they had visual communications. Anything communications related, it was through visual communications and getting that degree. So I can't remember, it must have been through school, I found out that they had a summer program called Commercial Art Prep School. And it was a 4-week program, and you actually stayed at the Duquesne University campus, and the school was located in a 7-story building in downtown Pittsburgh. So you can imagine it was one of those elevators that you had to pull the gate closed and then the door closed, and it was operated by an elevator operator person who actually ran the elevator. That's how old this building was. It was a very old building. It's just, Pittsburgh is one of my favorite cities for so many reasons. It was my first significant time away from home. And aside from camp, when you're a kid and you go away for a week or whatever. And so I was like, hey, let me see if this is really what I want to do. So the folks were probably glad to get rid of me for the 4 weeks. And they drove me over to Pittsburgh, dumped me off, moved into Duquesne University, got my supplies, and went to school basically like a traditional student. And it was so awesome because everything that they put in front of you in that program was as if you were a full-time high school grad going to college there. And I thought it was one of the coolest programs ever. Well, of course, because it was commercial art, it was something I was interested in. I fell in love with it. I fell in love with Pittsburgh. It was a city, it was urban, and we lived on a 4-acre farm in rural Pennsylvania at the time. It's not so rural anymore. It's been so developed. But for me, being in the city, I was getting to meet creative kids that were a lot of pot smokers and pizza eaters. It was like everybody was there having a party, and I was there like, this is cool. This is what I want to do. I love it. I love Pittsburgh. It was one of my best times as a young adult to go and have this opportunity. So I did this program in the summer, came back, and I'm like, I want to go there. That's where I want to go. Well, my dad, he's like, well, have you looked at other schools? And I was like, the eye roll when you're a 17-year-old. And I'm like, fine. So I started looking closer to home. And of course, at the time, we had Tyler School of Art, which was in Philadelphia, which would have made a lot of sense because it was close to where I lived. It would have been, I'm sure I would have figured out a way to live close to campus or on campus. And that was a 4-year school. And another school I looked at that was like my runner-up as far as choice, because I loved the city, I loved the urban setting, was Parsons School of Design, which was in New York City, in Manhattan. One of my great memories with my dad was while I was in my senior year of high school, we took the train from Philadelphia up to New York. And I went and I toured the school. And we did this all in one day. I remember it was like probably a week or two before Christmas, and it was very cold. It was very cold. And I was so excited to have like one-on-one with my dad, and we take the train up and got to the school, did the student recruitment tour, if you will. And then we spent the rest of the day just having fun in New York. We went to Macy's, and of course it was all decked out with their windows for Christmas and everything. Went in there, and I was so cold I actually had to buy like warmer clothes while we were there. And we did that, and then my dad found out, which is really funny because I never really understood how he knew where to go in New York because our family never went to New York. Even though it was pretty close to where you could get there pretty easily from where we lived, but we never went. We were such country folk. So anyway, he found this place in Little Italy, which was still Little Italy back then. We had an early dinner, and he had gotten tickets to see Sugar Babies. It was my first Broadway show. And my dad loved music. He loved musicals. He loved shows. We went and saw that. And then when we got out of the show, as if you know about how Broadway is on the first show, there's like no taxis anywhere. And it's mid-December. It's freezing. And we have to catch a train at Penn Station from Broadway. So we had to walk 17 blocks just to get to Penn Station to take the train. I don't know why I'm going into all this detail. It's just one of my favorite memories of time with my dad. It was a wonderful day. We had a great time. I loved the school, but I still had this inkling in my head that I wanted to go to the Art Institute of Pittsburgh. I went through the process of applying to Tyler, applying to Parsons, and I had already been accepted to the Art Institute of Pittsburgh because I had attended the prep school. That was like, right? So I just needed an option in case something changed or whatever. Another trip I made was up to Rhode Island School of Design, which was at the time, still is, a very notable art school. And I'm not sure how they do their program now, but back then what they did was it was a 4-year program, but you did 2 years of art at RISD, and then they had this agreement with Brown University where you did your academics at Brown. When I applied to these universities to go to school, I obviously had to supply a portfolio. Here's my art, which I had because I had done so much work that summer. So I was really proud of the portfolio I'd put together at the prep school. The one thing that I didn't get accepted to any of those schools, which was kind of a blessing in disguise because I really did want to go to the Art Institute of Pittsburgh. I was like, oh, Pittsburgh is just it's my jam. But my dad wanted me to go to the 4-year school because it was a bachelor's degree. This is how he was thinking. Everybody else in the family had a bachelor's. And I was just like, I just want to learn a trade and get out and work. I was so hungry to be independent and to work and to do my own thing and to just be on my own. So the reason why I didn't get accepted to these other schools was because of my stupid SATs were not where they wanted them to be. Academically, I was not a strong student. Part of it was because I wasn't strong in the STEM, science, math, that kind of thing, but also because I went to 3 different high schools. I had a really all over the place mishmash education. It was very bumpy for me as a young person looking back. My SATs were just not good enough. It was kind of obvious that, yeah, she's a creative, so she's not going to be doing anything like becoming an engineer or a scientist or a doctor or anything like that. Oh my goodness. So that was just kind of how it happened for me. And this is a long time ago. Things for young people and school and learning business and learning all that is so different today. So I know I sound so old, don't I? God. Just as I'm going through this, I'm like, oh my God. If anybody is like in their 20s or 30s listening to this, they're probably just rolling their eyes going, oh my God, this old lady. Sorry. Anyway, it doesn't feel that way to me. I mean, in my heart, I still feel like I'm, 18, 20, 22 or whatever. That's all the kind of backstory to where I went to college, what I focused in. And I did. I went to AIP, blew straight A's. It was fantastic. I went straight through because they actually had programs through the summer. So I literally got my AA in less than 2 years. And I couldn't wait to get out and work. Now, in the early 80s, we were in the middle of a recession. The economy was just flat. And of course, here's Art Institute of Pittsburgh pumping out a class every quarter. The marketplace was flooded with recent grads. And of course, the recent grads will work for anything just to get a job, right? I had the hardest time finding work. My first job, I ended up taking a job at a typography house. So this is back before desktop publishing, where they actually would have type houses that would typeset galleys and galleys of text for books, print collateral, anything that got printed. It'd go to the agency, they'd strip it up or wherever it went to create the book or whatever. That's all we did. And it was a family-owned business, and they needed a courier, a driver, to take the galleys into, because they were just outside of the city, take these galleys to the ad agencies that were requesting the work, right? So this is 1982, 83, 84, 85. Yeah. So I worked for them for about 3 years. Well, 2 weeks into me driving these things around, the owner realized like, oh, she actually has a brain, like maybe we should teach her how to use this equipment. So that was my first job. I was taught by a tradesman who came up through hot lead typography. So he was an amazing craftsman. He had an incredible eye. He taught me all about kerning, typography, the art and science of type. And to this day, I still am grateful for that. It's definitely given me a great foundation for any design I do today. So I laughed. This is just, I have the funniest, but I was so happy. And you know what I was making an hour? $4 an hour in 1982, driving a car around Pittsburgh, delivering galleys. That was my job. So he took me under his wing. I didn't even know how to type. When I went to high school, the first, I guess, month and a half, I missed of that quote unquote year that you learn to type, which I think was 10th grade, because I had major back surgery. I fell out of a tree, hurt my back, had to have surgery, and I was laid up for a while. So for anybody who's taken a typing class, when you learn how to type, you learn basically the strokes, like where your fingers go. And so you can actually not constantly do the hunt and peck and look at your keyboard and all that stuff. Well, I never learned those basics. So my typing skills were terrible. Well, that was the core skill that was required at this job. So one day, when he decided he wanted me to learn typography and help them in the business, because it was just a husband and wife at the time. And he sent me home with an old musty learning to type book, the kind that flips over the top. And I went home and I had an electric typewriter and I taught myself how to type. So over time, because I was doing this job every day and he taught me everything, I got to about 120 words a minute, which is really fast. And this is on these kind of old, IBM style computers with the real fat keys and everything. So the keyboards we have today are compared to what we had back then. So I got really, really good. And because I was being paid by the hour and he started getting busier and I was producing so much work, I just learned. I was so hungry for it. I loved what I was doing. I had no social life. I basically was I'd get up, I'd go to work, and that would be that. 3 years into this work, I started feeling I'm not really using what I learned in college. And I think it was a little more of a sharpened pencil for me because I learned a trade. So it was a specific trade that I meant to do in the workplace. I decided that I wanted to start my own business. And I know that's a long preamble to getting you to the point where I'm telling you about my first business, but here it is. While I was working with this small family business, I learned obviously a lot about type. I learned a lot about printing. And I already knew some things from school. And so I had the wild idea to start my own greeting card business. Yes, believe it or not, I decided to come out with my own greeting card business. And I called them Pappy Cards because, again, I have the coolest last name. I gave my notice and quit the job and said, I'm going to start my own business. I'd saved up, I think back then I saved up maybe 10 grand. So I could support myself. My expenses were very low at the time. I think my rent was $350 a month. It's insane. I felt so elevated and excited and happy. And finally, I get to do something where I'm using my skills that I learned in college. And I can do the writing that I love to do. I can do the design. I can design the logo. I can get the letter set and press type my logo because we didn't have desktop publishing back then. Everything was done by hand. My employer, that family business, they were very upset that I left because I was making them money and they treated me like part of their families. It was challenging for both of us to end that relationship, but we ended up healing it a couple years later, so it's all good. And Vince, if you're listening, you and Barb are the best. Thank you for giving me my start. So I started my business and I didn't know what the heck I was doing. So I went to Boston that summer and I think I quit that job in the spring and I threw everything in my car and I said, I'm going to come up and see my sister and I'm going to do some market research up here. So I stayed with my sister for the summer and her kids were little and it was just a blast to be with family and such. And I would go into greeting card stores and I'd interview the shop owner or the manager. And I'd say, what do people like? And how does it work? And this, that, and the other. And I learned just by going and asking. It was reflecting on that. It's the beginnings of my qualitative research skill honing, if you will, because I love doing qualitative research. That got me the foundation for all right, this is how it works. It's Keystone. So if a card retails for $1, you only get 50 cents. Most of the time, they won't pay for the card, it's like consignment where they'll buy the cards at Keystone, and then whatever they don't sell, you have to take back. I was selling my cards for $1.50 retail, and so I'd sell them to the shop owner for 75 cents. And I know that sounds like it is peanuts. I mean, when you think about it. So I'm not going to go through all the details about the card selling, but I had notepads. I had primarily a greeting card line, and I had done some designs that the company that printed them, because they were 4-color process printing, they submitted them to the Pennsylvania Printing Awards. They won honorable mention. So I was really excited about getting that kind of recognition for some of my cards. And I'd hear some great stories that the retailers would come back and say, oh, this woman came in and she had a very unusual situation and your card just was perfect. And she came up and told me this is the most perfect card. And, so I got little stories like that and experiences doing it. And it just made me feel so like complete about what I was doing and why I was doing it. And it was very fulfilling to have that come full circle. Until Hallmark came out with their Gold Crown store. Now, I had gone door to door in Pittsburgh selling my cards to all the local independent stores as well as to Hallmark stores, believe it or not. And they'd carry my cards. I had the spinners and everything. I'd go set it up, and I had to get like this minivan to carry everything. It was such a fun time for me. But the money was so small going in, and each store was $50, $100. And my printing expenses were kind of running up there, and I was running up a credit card. They just weren't moving as fast as I would have liked. So Hallmark comes out with Gold Crown. Now, what was going on back then is there were several companies that were coming out with independent lines. And there were companies that weren't Terry Pappy Solopreneur. They were companies that had backing, that had money, that had resources, that maybe had their own printing plant. One of them was Blue Mountain Arts. Carlton was another one. And what they were doing is they were trying to compete with the monopoly of Hallmark. And American Greetings, of course, was another big company that produced card lines. And Hallmark decided that they were losing shelf space to other companies, and they wanted to sell their cards. Being the monopoly that they were, they decided, because they had all the retail stores, they had all the retail locations, so they had that advantage. And they came up with this Gold Crown idea. And the Gold Crown was for the retailers. A big expense for retailers at the time was fixtures. So all the signage, the racks, the spinners, the stuff that displays everything in a Hallmark greeting card store. And they said, if you become a Gold Crown store, you have to follow this criteria. And the main criteria was they couldn't carry any independent lines. It had to be all Hallmark products. And to this day, the Gold Crown model is still in place. Every time I go into a Hallmark store, I kind of get this shudder, like this ick factor. It takes me a lot to buy a Hallmark card for that reason, because it put me out of business. I lost more than half of the retailers that I had in Pittsburgh. And it happened like overnight. It was the craziest thing. So here I am. I've got a credit card debt. I'm hand spraying a lot of my cards, color on my cards, because I can't afford to do 4-color process on all my cards. I'm running around town delivering them. I'm picking up cards that won't sell because the retailers are tired of looking at them. And all of a sudden, everything just kind of fell apart. And I was like, crap, this sucks. And here I am. I have an art degree. I'm a creative. I have no business sense, no business training. And I just went out there and followed a dream. And I started it. And that's my point about, I think I touched on it in the last episode. There's really nothing in the way of you starting a business, you being very successful, especially today. Now, back then, very big difference, right? It was just a completely different economy, environment, and whatnot. And so I ended up having to give it up. My dad, God bless him, paid off my credit card, which I think was like around $3,000, which sounds like nothing today. But it was like, I felt like I had a mortgage at the time. I ran through my savings and I had run up that credit card, and I said, Dad, I can't do this anymore. God bless him. He bailed me out and he said, okay. He said, go get a job. And I'm like, yep, already way ahead of you. So I ended up going back into typography, and, that led to other jobs. And eventually I left Pittsburgh and came down to Florida. And that was a whole different series of exciting events as far as my career, which really started to take shape when I moved to Florida and settled in Orlando and started working at a printing company. That was my first business. And that's how I started. I just saved money. I cut the cord, went out and said, I have no other income right now. I have my savings and I'm just going to make it work. And I did. I think I did it for like 3 years. I actually was able to live off my savings and make enough money to pay some bills and so on. But it was very meager, very small. And then once the gold crown thing happened, that was it. It was like RIP. You could hear the bugles playing taps for me. I was like, oh God. And because I tried to get independent reps to get into the remaining and try to go national because I was just regional. I just couldn't get anybody interested in my stuff. It was heartbreaking. It really was, because I poured my heart and soul into the creative, into the copywriting that I did. I even hired a couple writers just to change it up so it was not like all Terry. And I tried. I really did. But boy, did I learn a lot from that experience. What I want to leave you with in this episode is looking back over your life. And if you haven't done it, I'm sure you could probably position this prompt into something like a project that you might have taken on. But in your life, where have you started your own business based on a dream? Whether it be a side hustle, whether it be a project, like you did a project for a year or 2 years, or you're still doing it. What was that experience like? How did you feel? I want you to write or think about how you felt when you took that on. The trepidation, the excitement, oh my God, this is going to work. What kind of thoughts did you have about it? What did people say about it? Because a lot of us are oriented around what people think when we take on something like this. So for me, it was just so much excitement because I was so young. I was naive. I was idealistic. I just wanted to be creative. I just wanted to create things that made people happy, that made people laugh, because I did a lot of cartooning in some of the designs I did. I had the best time doing that. Pappy Cards was my first business. It started everything for me. So for you, think about that time when you started your business, or when you started that first attempt at a business, or whatever it is, whether you were a young person, whether it was just last year when you started. Write about how you felt. What were you thinking about it? What were you worried about? What did people say? How did you get support? Where did you go to get your resources? What was the whole experience like starting up? And just as a little teaser, for season 2, my theme for that season is going to be starting. I'm going to be talking a lot about getting started, what it takes, how to keep that enthusiasm going, that passion going. How do you do it without getting yourself in trouble like I did? Like maybe have more savings or do it a little smarter. But it was a blast, and I have zero regrets about doing it. And I still have some of my cards, which is kind of cool. I just want to leave you with that. And remember that having your own business is an experience that is full of you and your self-expression and everything you can bring to the table to add value, help someone out, to make money, to give yourself the freedom and the experience of using your body, your mind, and your skills to create. And I will leave you with that. Thanks for listening. Well, I know you're disappointed, but that's it for this episode. Listen, the great news is there's another one coming, so stay tuned. Anyway, I just want to make sure that you do the prompt. If this episode had a prompt, and you get that homework done, because you're going to be a better solopreneur. How's that for a maternal finger shaking at you? Hey, listen, thanks so much for being here, for giving me time of your day, and, for taking it on. So if you want to learn more and stay connected with me, just head on over to mysolopreneurlife.com. Thanks a bunch. See you soon. That was pretty good. I think I'll keep that one.